A little while ago, I saw an advert on Facebook Marketplace where a woman claimed to be giving away free gerbils. Apparently, the boy-girl pair she owned had produced a huge litter of little gerbil babies, and since they were too much for her to handle, she was just going to give them away to a handful of loving homes. The ad didn't include the grim little factoid that the gerbil mum would probably eat her babies if she didn't think she could care for them. So, knowing this detail, I got in touch. The woman turned out to be a widow who had originally bought the gerbils to keep her company. I did think it was kind of unusual that she didn't just get herself the one cat or dog, if loneliness was the issue. But hey, different strokes for different folks, right? I'm not one to judge, and she seemed so sweet when I called her to arrange a date and time to go pick up 2 of the gerbils. Needless to say, I did not expect her to be living in the conditions that she was. Because when me and my dad arrived at her home with a little straw-bedded cage to take the gerbils home in, the whole exchange took a turn for the worse. We rang the doorbell to Gerbil Lady's place, and at first, there was no reply. Then, when she finally answered the door, we could see she was in quite a sorry state. One of her eyes had swollen and was bloodshot, with some super gross looking yellow gunk collecting in the corner of the eye, but we remained polite and just ignored it. The last thing me and Dad wanted to do was offend or upset the lady by pointing out what was an already obvious medical condition. But when she invited us inside, we got a clue as to how she got sick in the first place. Her little house reeked like it was the single worst stench that had ever graced my nostrils, and there were gerbils everywhere, and I mean everywhere, and much like their owner, they were not in a good condition. Just from the gerbils that were skittering around the kitchen, I could see that many of them were missing fur in patches, or had painful looking growths around their legs or backs. Then, when she invited us into her TV room for a cup of tea, we could see it was even worse in there. We had to make up some excuse about how we couldn't stay for long after me and my dad shot each other a telepathic look that basically said giant nope. And with the amount of gerbil poop that clogged up every little corner and skirting board, it was absolutely no wonder that she had some kind of infection. When I caught sight of an actual tiny rodent skeleton behind one of her curtains, I went into full improv mode to get us out of there. I turned to my dad, named some piece of important gerbil habitat that we hadn't picked up from the pet store yet. Wink wink. He then agreed that, we can't possibly bring home the gerbils without insert name of doodad here. We'll have to call by again in a couple of days. I remember us both sitting in the car afterward, just in shock at what we'd just seen. The fact that someone could live like that was just depressing and terrifying to me. She obviously had no one coming to check on her, and anyone who thought it was okay to keep a home like that must have been losing their marbles. It sucked having to make a decision like we did. I felt really mean, basically snitching. But we just had to call Animal Rescue, for her benefit more than anything else. The ASPCA rep we spoke to said they'd investigate and let us know what their call was going to be, and in the end, they got back in touch, thanking us for the tip. Not only was the gerbil lady now in touch with a local charity that would help check up on her in her twilight years, but her house was considerably cleaner and safer after they'd cleared out almost 100 gerbils from her property. They said the situation was so bad that the only thing that kept the infestation from spreading were the neighborhood cats. I did remember seeing a bunch of strays hanging around outside, but I figured it was just because she was the local animal lover who would routinely feed them treats or whatever. But as it turns out, she was breeding treats for them, just not in the way she might like to think. The creepiest thing about it was that from standing outside her home, you'd never have guessed at the horror show waiting for you on the inside. And the whole thing just reminds me that we don't really know what's going on behind closed doors, even the ones closest to us. Behind the facade of normalcy, we have no idea what our friends and neighbours are up to, or what nightmarish conditions they're living under. A couple of years ago, I was selling a bike and decided to use Facebook Marketplace as I had previously done with other items. I had a response pretty quickly and arranged to meet the guy. After sending me the location, I met him at night outside a weird shed he said he was doing some remodeling work on. In the message, he said it was for a dentist office, but it was definitely not a dentist office. There wasn't even a dentist office in the area. Every single instinct told me to just leave, but I needed the money. His account was less than 6 months old. His knowledge of high-end bikes was non-existent. The street was dark, and I'm a scrawny little dude who can't fight. I messaged him that I had arrived, and he popped open the manual garage door on the shed. The dude had some pretty awful looking prison tattoos, and looked like a homeless MMA fighter. There were so many red flags that I almost took off on the bike to get away from him. However, I put on a brave face and said hello to him. He paid in cash, asked a ton of questions about bikes, and I went on my way. To my surprise, the cash was real, and he still messages me every few months about how to do some basic maintenance stuff on the bike. He's actually a really nice guy. He had just gotten out of prison and was working extremely hard to get his life back on track. I honestly think the real horror story is the hoops he had to jump through to make an honest living after parole. I wouldn't advocate for anyone to do what I did. Arrange a safe and public place to meet, and in the daylight, if possible. But my faith in humanity grew a ton that night. Before I continue with the final story, if you've enjoyed this video so far, please leave a like, a comment, and subscribe to see future content from me, as well as help me in the algorithm. Thank you. This guy was selling a truck for a pretty fair price on Facebook Marketplace. My husband talked to him for a few days about all the work the guy had done to it, and he seemed totally normal. My husband asked to come see the truck and take it for a test drive. The guy agreed, and my husband suggested a meeting point. The guy read the message, then didn't respond for hours. Finally, the guy said he can't make it out anywhere and asked my husband to meet at his house and gave an address. The address the guy gave didn't work in Google Maps. It showed up as an empty field near a few streets of houses. My husband then asked him why it's showing an empty field in Google Maps, and the guy said Google is wrong and it's the address to his shop. My husband asked if the guy could meet at around 6 PM at his shop. The guy again read the message and didn't respond. It's getting closer to 6 PM at this point, so my husband sent another message asking if they're on. The guy replied that he's at work and can't meet until after 9 PM. At this point, my husband is annoyed, and so he responds that it's too late and they'll just have to meet up on a day he doesn't work. The guy suddenly says 6 PM is fine and to come over. So we hopped in our car and headed over to this empty field. Once we arrived, my husband sent a text to him to confirm that we're here. The guy then messages a list of instructions on how to go through this area to get to his shop. We checked the instructions with Google Maps, and this guy was asking us to drive basically far away from these houses and busy streets. And there's not even any buildings showing on these back roads he wanted us to take. My husband sent a text back saying he doesn't feel comfortable coming up to the shop and to just bring the truck up to the original agreed meeting spot. The guy read the messages and didn't respond. We waited 15 minutes and then said we are leaving. As we were driving away, the guy started spamming, "Wait, I'm bringing it." And after we had driven away for a few minutes, the guy said, "That was you in the describes our car, come back." The guy kept begging us to come back and look at the truck for days afterwards, and refused to meet at a neutral spot. He kept insisting we come back to his shop.